com. Today I'm going to bring you a long delayed video segments playing some standard today. Today we're going to be playing some Jund. A bit different take on it than a lot of other people I've seen playing Jund right now, but here's the list. A couple fiery impulses for some good early removal coupled with ultimate price. Make sure we don't die in the early game. A couple of transgress the mind for some of the control decks that exist in the format, which seem pretty prevalent over the last couple of weeks from what I've seen playing Magic Online. Dead Protectors, of course, in the 2 spot, but of course something more like a 5 drop, just simply in the fact that we're looking to buy back cards, and a lot of very good cards in the deck that we can buy back here. A couple good targets, including like the Painful Truce here, giving us the opportunity to draw cards. Being in the 3rd color gives us a lot of pure just raw card advantage, which is never something to scoff at by any means. Infinite Obliteration is an interesting card, some say, in the main board, but no deck is winning right now without creatures, and it's really good to play in the main deck once you have a decent grasp on the format and can actually go through and know, okay, they're playing this many copies of Jace, or they're playing this many Archangel Avacons, and just kind of tear out the best creature in their deck before it actually becomes a problem for us. So I found playing one in the main, especially after playing Seasons Past, has been a good transition moving over into something like Jund here. Planeswalkers are very big in the Shadows over Innistrad standard format, so we have a total of 3 Ruinous Paths, something that can hit Planeswalkers, something of course that can hit the creatures as well, and just another great removal spell we can buy back with Den Protector, or something we haven't quite got to, our Goblin Dark Dwellers, quite yet. Radiant Flames is very similar to the effect that we have Fiery Impulse and Ultimate Price in the deck for, and that we just want to be able to clear the early creatures that we sometimes may not be able to deal with, since we really aren't putting any pressure on our opponent in the first couple turns of the game. We need to be able to survive to the late turns for our deck to really excel. Nissa is just a very good value engine. She buys us a card out of the deck. If we play her right away, she's just a 2/2 that gets us, a forest. But as the game progresses late, being able to turn her into a planeswalker at will is a very strong effect. She's a very good planeswalker, and definitely one not to be taken lightly. So we have 2 copies there. The main card that we want to buy back with Den Protector as well as Goblin Dark Dweller is the Kolaghan's Command. So much value here. I mean, there's so much we can do as far as keeping our opponent with no cards in hand. I find myself often keeping a stop on my opponent's draw step just simply because I know they have no cards, they're drawing a card. Great, I can Kolaghan's Command, make sure you don't actually get a main phase or any sorcery creature or planeswalker type spell to play that turn. And on top of that, it usually can go as far as buying us back like a Goblin Dark Dweller, which our opponent just has to deal with a lot of the time. So this is a very versatile card, and one reason to actually be playing the deck is Kolaghan's Command. I'm not entirely sure a 4th is necessary, just with how frequent we were using them. We don't want to get oversaturated, in my opinion. So Kalidas, great main board card, great at also making sure we don't die in the early game. A 3/4 with lifelink for 4 mana is already good rate, but when we're also in the market of killing a lot of our opponent's creatures, being able to get this 2/2 zombie on the battlefield can really make or break a game. One interaction that's quite interesting, and one of the reasons I actually am playing this card, Arlen Cord here, is you start to take over a game, you very often will have a board of 3 to 4 2/2 black zombie tokens, and being able to flip Arlen Cord and give them all +1/+1 trample is a pretty quick way to end a game. Before we jump to more about Arlen Cord, though, we do have just a Singleton Languish, just kind of diversifying between Radiant Flames and Languish here. Languish kills a lot of our board in Kalidas and Goblin Dark Dweller, so we're playing a second copy of Radiant Flames instead of the second copy of Languish, as this is kind of a worst case scenario pull the trigger type card. It's definitely a necessity in the deck, and one that we would include even if we were playing all 4/4s, simply just for the way that the format has developed at this point. Over time, I think control decks are going to become more prevalent, however, and we may be able to go down a Languish, possibly making room for like a second Chandra or our 3rd Arlen Cord, both of which are very powerful cards. Jumping into Arlen Cord, it doesn't quite seem like the type of card you'd necessarily want in a control deck, as most of the abilities are in regards to creatures. But Arlen plays a very strong double duty, and that you get a 2/2 creature, you get something to clog up the board and keep your planeswalker alive so she can protect herself before she flips, and then you just start bolting your opponent in worst case scenario. But more often than not, too, we'll find ourselves in a position where we want to go Goblin Dark Dwellers, after having Arlen Cord in play, simply so once she's flipped over to her daylight side, we can go ahead and +2/+2 Vigilance Haste the Goblin Dark Dweller, giving us a superb blocker. Has Menace already, so it's going to be hitting pretty hard in combination with Arlen Cord here. Of course, Goblin Dark Dweller again is pretty much the main engine of the deck in a lot of ways, which is why we have the full 4 copies in here. But if you notice, we don't actually play 4 of anything except for lands basically in the deck. So Goblin Dark Dweller is there predominantly to buy back ultimate prices, transgress the minds. Occasionally a Fiery Impulse, though that I must admit is rare. Infinite Obliteration is always a great target with Goblin Dark Dweller, especially if you've already gotten it back once with a Dun Protector. Like, getting to cast 1 card 3 times over the course of a game is a lot of power. I mean, you're getting just so much advantage over what your opponent's doing. It's something good to be doing. But of course, again, Kolaghan's Command is the primary buyback target, just because it basically can make the game out of reach for your opponents. Singleton Chandra, she's pretty high up on the curve. She's a good card, but something that I don't know. It could be very good and could be the all-star of our deck. It's something I may need to test a little bit more, to be honest with you. But I know the power level's there with Chandra, and it's an easy auto include in a deck like this. Sideboard, we have 3 copies of Duress for when we get into either like the green-white tokens matchups where we need to be hitting their planeswalkers very consistently. But it's also very good against the Grixis control decks, the Esper control decks, the whatever X flavor of control happens to be out there that week. Transgress the Mind number 3 is just the same purpose. We just want to make sure that we can get the problematic cards out of our opponent's hand and just not have to worry. Pair of Glass of the Darkness, just to help pick off early creatures when necessary. Also very good in games where you know your opponents are playing Goblin Dark Dwellers. It gives you another clean answer on top of like the ultimate price, whereas Fiery Impulse may not just be, may just not be as good, basically. Pick the Brain. Great way to take care of planeswalkers in the late game against the green-white decks. It's also just very good if you can produce Delirium. We have instants, we have sorceries, we have planeswalkers, we have creatures, and of course lands. We even have a pair of Evolving Wilds to help get these lands into the bin when needed. So Pick the Brain can come up as a card that you'll actually just basically get to slaughter games a card, and it's very good. To the Slaughter, very good against. It's actually very poor. Well, let me start where it's poor. So it's poor against the green-white tokens deck. A lot of the times, like, yeah, you get to hit their planeswalker, which is great, but like you're just picking off a token for the second end of it. So it's like a 1.1 for 1 basically. So it's kind of an odd card at times. It is very good in like say mirror matches of sorts, like the Grixis control mirrors and stuff like that. It's a good card. Rhythm Plague, good against other Chandra decks, good against the tokens deck, of course. It's just a card that can eliminate the way that they are going about trying to win the game. They can no longer go wide, and usually the matches we board this in, we of course have to board out Arlen Cord and Chandra's, simply because we don't want our enchantment to be giving all of the value we're getting off of our cards as well, but definitely does serve a role. I don't think that these 2 cards alone can beat the green-white token deck, so usually we can just pull those, bring in Verdant Plague, bring in a couple other solid cards like the Duresses and Transgress the Minds, and we're okay. Infinite Obliteration is also a good card against green-white tokens. It's also very good against just a very large number of the field, like I mentioned with the main deck copies. So we have 2 more just to make sure that we can. I mean, there's been games, for example, I've played where we flat out take every creature out of our opponent's deck with Infinite Obliterations, and I had a buddy that I tested with who said, I don't even feel like I'm losing right now. And then I flashed back Infinite Obliteration to take the very last of any creature he had in his deck, and soon after it became very evident that he no longer could win the game. So Crumble to Dust is an interesting choice at times, but it's a great answer to Westvale Abbey, especially in conjunction with Clipwings here. Being able to have access to both of these cards mean you can hit Westvale Abbey at any stage of the game. It's also very good against a lot of decks that are dependent, especially like the 4-color rights deck, for example, that are dependent on being able to hit these lands to fairly cast their cards. Like if they aren't playing Collected Company, if if they just don't have it, for example, this can keep Reflector Mages and things like that at bay, which is a good effect. Clipwings, again, they're just for any decks that are playing like Esper Dragons, for example, or any of the Westvale Abbey decks, comes quite in handy there. Naturalize, very good card against a lot of decks. Again, I mean, there's no other way to explain it that a lot of decks are playing enchantments, and it's very clear that ramp decks, of course, are going to have the artifacts as well in the form of like Hedron Archive, so it comes in just as a way to eke out some more value. Seasons Past lets us buy back some pretty good cards all the way through the 1-6 spot if we get into a slow control mirror. Some games we simply just don't have the time to rely on drawing something like a Season's Pass, so I've relegated it to the sideboard, though it is a very good card in a control deck such as this, and one that comes in when it shines. So I'd like to briefly touch just on the land base here, kind of some of the decisions I've made on the lands. There's a couple of things that some people may consider odd, so I just want to kind of clarify a few things on that, and we'll jump into a couple of games. So I went with 3 Cinderglades here. I mean, the base of the deck, it's very easy to see when we sort by color. It's a base black deck. I mean, we do have quite a bit of cards that have red in it, but in conjunction with the black, with how many double black cards are in the deck, it's very important that we hit our black mana. Red and green are quite important, but not to the extent you would imagine. So we only have cards, things like 3 Cinderglade. Initially, I only played 2 Forests, but it's so good just to be able to make sure you have one to find with Nissa that I went up to a 3rd copy, yes, with the Mountain. We have 4 Swamps for a total of 10 basic lands here, with only 2 Evolving Wilds. So, I mean, it's very rare we end up in a spot where we have an Evolving Wilds in our hand and no more basics to fetch, so I feel like this separation as far as what cards we play has been pretty beneficial for me so far. For Boarding Ruins, may notice I'm not playing any game trails actually. It's because the black is so important and red-green is moderately important. I'd much rather just rely on Cinderglades to play those spells than something like a game trail. As the game goes on with 10 basics, a lot of the times these are coming into play untapped at the time we need the double red for our top end of the curve. So Cinderglade could just be a better red-green land than Game Trail in this deck, whereas Foreboding Ruins and Smoldering Marsh are both very good red-black lands that are necessary. For Hissing Quagmire goes as an alternative way to attack the game when our creatures just aren't getting there or we can't generate enough value off of our Planeswalkers. It's also a great way to pick off a very large creature or keep our opponent at bay just by passing with lands that have been allowing us to amass card advantage. So that's a brief touch on the lands itself, though. Again, I would like to very much get into a couple of games. We'll probably only do 3 or so with it for now. But at this point, I just want to thank you for watching, and can't wait to see how this